Here in just a minute, we are going to let people join in. I started the session just a little bit early because sometimes it takes Zoom a minute to get things going here. So everybody just hang tight there and we'll get started very soon. And for those of you who just stepped in, we're going to give it a few more seconds to let some people join in. Sometimes when you start a Zoom session like this, there's a little bit of a line and a little bit of a lag. So give us just a minute as we let a few more people join the session. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining our session today. This is our session on strategizing and maximizing compliance for Form 2290. So we'll go through a little bit of an introduction here in just a minute, but before we do that, the lawyers say we have to do this. It's just one of those things. Don't want anybody to think that we're providing tax, legal, or accounting advice, although we provide tax software. So, it's just one of those things. But again, the lawyers say, hey, put this up there so you don't get in trouble. And so we always like to put it up there so we don't get in trouble. So please do take a moment to read that. And you can find the slides here in one of your little deposits there. We'll also send these to you afterwards. We'll send a recording of this out to you as well in case you want to share it with somebody else. So this is me. I am Ed Pratt, co-founder and chief operating officer at ZenWork. And so I've been around for a while, so you can tell by the hair that I've been doing compliance for a good bit of while. I live in Conway, Arkansas. Our offices, our headquarters are over in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And so if you're familiar at all with Arkansas, most people aren't, but if you're familiar at all with Arkansas, Conway's more towards the center of the state near Little Rock, just off of I-40. And Fayetteville is over in the northwest part of the state, a little bit north of I-40, about an hour north of Fort Smith as you're going through there. So I've been doing this here with ZenWork since 2013. So I've been around for a good bit of time there. And, we like to do these sessions so that we can try to spread some of our information around and get you guys ready to go for our tax season that's coming up here pretty soon. I'm going to do 3 polls today, assuming that Zoom cooperates with me. I'm going to do 3 polls today. And so my first one that I'm going to launch out here is just asking what you do inside of the trucking industry. So some of you might actually be drivers, some of you might be doing stuff outside of the driving area, and that is totally fine. Just kind of want to get a framework for who I'm talking to out there as you guys are participating in the session today. We have it's kind of interesting. We have all kinds of people who sign up for our products. We've got everything from accountants and tax attorneys to truck drivers to people who are, kind of tangential. I think that's the word I want to say, that they kind of fit in from the sideways for particular areas of the industry. And so I'm always just kind of interested to see what happens. And this is what usually happens. So I'm gonna end the poll and share the results with you so you can see 60% of the people who responded to the poll are other. So you might be not one of the actual names that's on here, but that doesn't mean you're not important, and that's why I want to ask and see what kind of folks we've got sharing our session out there today. So thanks for replying to that one. I'll have a couple more as we go through our session today. So let's talk about what we're here to talk about. Our agenda for today, we are going to go through heavy vehicle utility tax information. Obviously, that's why we're here. We're gearing up for the tax season, and it's interesting we call it a tax season because it's the off season for taxes in our other businesses. We'll talk a little bit about that though as we get into it. We're going to talk about some of the essential requirements that you need to do your e-filing. We're going to talk about when you've got to pay that tax. whether it's you paying it or you are paying it on behalf of one of your clients, if you're a broker, if you're someone who's helping get truckers set up, that kind of thing. The minimum weight requirements for driving, the criteria for taxable or tax suspended vehicles, because if you have a tax suspended vehicle, you shouldn't be paying the tax, and so you want to know what your kind of loophole is that you can drive through there. Logging vehicles are something we always get questions about, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Agricultural vehicles, and then how to do the e-filing process as we go. If you have any questions, I got a Q&A bullet point here in the agenda, but if you have any questions, there's a Q&A panel in the little Zoom screen thing, the toolbar that they have there. Just click on that and click and type in your question. I'll be happy to try to answer those as best I can as we get towards the end of the session. All right, so let's talk about some of those essential requirements for e-filing the heavy vehicle use tax. So one of the first things you got to have, and again, you probably know this, but you got to have your employer identification number. You can't file it on your social security number. Really easy to get an employer identification number, an EIN. You just go online to the IRS website and you fill out a little form. It takes about 5 minutes, and you get that EIN back. It's important to remember that your EIN, especially if you're an individual owner operator or if you're working with people who are individual owner operators, your EIN is associated to your name. So my name is Edward Pratt, for example. And so when I fill out and get an EIN, the IRS is going to recognize my EIN as belonging to Edward Pratt. I'm not going to recognize it as Ed's Trucking Company or whatever it is I might call my business. It's going to recognize it as my actual name. It goes along with my social security number. So when you're doing your 2290, when you're preparing your 2290 or you're preparing it for someone else, keep that in mind, because if you put in Ed's Trucking Company with my EIN, IRS is going to turn around and reject that because the name and the number don't go together. So when you apply for that EIN, just keep in mind that even though it's a different EIN and you put in a doing business as name, a DBA, it's going to come back to your actual personal name. In most instances, there are some ways where it doesn't, when you're doing a C Corp or an S Corp or something like that. For most of the folks who are out there doing individual owner operator driving, it's going to be your personal name that EIN is going to come back to. So in addition to your EIN, you got to have your VIN, and so that's that big long number. They used to be shorter, but they've made them longer, and in the last 25 years or so, they've made the VINs pretty long. You want to have your gross vehicle weight. We'll talk a little bit about that for elimination of confusion, because we do get questions about the gross vehicle weight. And then the first month of use. So we'll talk about the first month of use too, because there's different scenarios, right? If you just buy a truck in February, then your first month of use might be February, right? But we're coming up on a renewal season. And so what that means is most everybody's, excuse me, most everybody's first month of use is going to be July, because that's when the tax year starts. You want to have an IRS approved e-file provider. So we are one of those, Ez2290. You see it up in the corner of each one of our slides, but you can find a list of us out on the IRS website. There's a website where you can find all kinds of e-file providers, and you're going to put all that information in, and we're going to take care of the filing piece for you for doing your e-filing of the HVUT. One thing that you always want to make sure you're doing as you're going through your process is make sure you've got everything accurate and complete. So there's 17 digits in your vehicle identification number. The vehicle identification number can't contain L's or whatever it is. There's different things that VIN can't contain. And so if you're like me and you never learned how to type, you're going through and kind of punching the keys, one at a time. Just make sure that you're doing it right. Get somebody to look over your shoulder and double check it. Actually, if you're like me, you probably get your wife to do it, because she's much better at doing this stuff than I am. But just make sure that somebody looks at it and does it the right way. Those of you who are in the game and doing it as a ongoing basis, you are filing these for 150 truckers every season, or 300 truckers every season, or 1,000 truckers every season. You probably don't have to worry about that quite as much. You still want to be careful with it, but you're probably used to punching that stuff in and getting it right, because that's what your job is, and so you're good at it. So that's a good thing for you guys, is to just be sure that that accuracy and completeness is always there. There are a few ways you can pay the tax itself. You can always pay by check. So if you're going through Ez2290 and you say you want to pay by check, we'll give you a voucher at the end of the process, and you can just write your check and send it on in. You can also pay through credit card or debit card. That wasn't available, 2-3 years ago. You couldn't pay it by credit card or debit card. But the other two ways to do it are electronic funds withdrawal, and that's just as simple as putting in your bank account information and letting the IRS take the money out of your account. The problem with that is you don't know exactly when they're going to do it, and so that can lead to a hiccup every now and then. But you can also use what's called the EFTPS, the Electronic Federal Tax Payment System, and even those of you who are acting on behalf of others can use your login for the Electronic Federal Tax Payment System and coordinate that payment for your guests that you're filing that for. Once you've decided how you're going to make that payment, submitting the form electronically is really the only way to do it. You can go to the IRS, but they're going to do it electronically too. But you got to get it got to get it through to the IRS electronically, and that's again where it comes back to the EIN and having your name correct and make sure all your information is correct. That Schedule 1 is the form that you actually want to keep with you. So if you're driving your truck, or if you're keeping a file folder for your truck drivers that you're working with, you want to make sure you've got that stamped Schedule 1 as proof of the payment that the IRS will send. They'll send it right back as soon as you complete the e-filing process. It doesn't take them but a few minutes most of the time to send it. July 1st, it'll take them a little bit longer because we build up a stack of them coming from now until July 1st, but it'll take them just a few minutes to turn that around and get it out to you. And we call it a stamped Scheduled 1 because it's got a little bit of what's called a watermark on it now. If you've ever done it in person at the IRS, they get like those notary stamps, right? They stamp it and they put an actual seal on it, and so that's why they call it a stamped Schedule 1. Even though what you get when you do it electronically, it's not going to be a stamp. It's going to be an equivalent of a stamp being in the watermark there. I mentioned earlier that there is a minimum weight requirement, and so if you fall under the minimum weight requirement, then you don't have to worry about doing this. However, most people who are out there driving as professionals, or who are helping the professionals to stay on the road and stay legal on the road, are above and beyond this minimum weight threshold of 55,000 pounds. That weight that they're looking for is the taxable gross weight. It's the total amount of the vehicle weight. It's also the total amount of the trailer. It's also the total amount of the load. So everything that goes into that weigh, if you go into a weigh station, everything that goes into that weight is something that should be included in your taxability. And what you're shooting for is the maximum minimum, if I can put it that way. So 55,000 pounds is the minimum, but whatever you're going to hit during the year, during that highest point, that's where you want to put your weight as you're going in and filling out the form. It's got little ranges in there, and so you'll want to hit the top mark, because if you ever get caught and you're driving more than what you told them you're going to drive, that's not going to be a good thing either. So that weight, you're attesting to the weight, you're attesting to the vehicle, you're attesting to all that stuff on an annual basis. And so that tax that you're going to pay annually due is going to be around $550 usually, if you're doing the highest weight category that you can do. Now, one of the things about using an e-file provider like like Ez2290 is that we calculate that tax rate for you. So you just tell us what your vehicle is when you put the vehicle on the road, and then we will calculate that out for you. And so you'll make sure that you're paying the right amount. All right, so poll number 2, just another quick question. This is going to be more in line with your length of time in the industry. So you told me, that some of you are in another stance, some of you are owner operators, some of you are doing some other things out there. But how long have you been doing it? Because one of the things we hear about all the time is that there's a shortfall in the industry, right? You know, there's not enough people who are coming out of school, high school, who are coming out of trade school, who are wanting to be truck drivers. You know, and again, some of you aren't truck drivers; you're working as fleet managers or whatever. But you know, it's something that's concerning for the industry going forward, and so it's good. I'm gonna stop the poll here and share the results with you, because what I'm seeing here, some of this is really good. So somebody's ever been there forever, and thank you. I feel like I've been here forever sometimes too. But you know, some of you guys are under 5 years, so that is it's great that you get some new blood coming in and working through the industry, working their way up through the industry. That's a great thing, and much respect to those of you who have been here for many years out there as well. Keep coming back, so that's good. All right, so keeping on going with our payments, with the informations that we're sharing out here today, the HVUT, you won't hear it called the HVUT very much. You know, you just hear it called an excise tax, you hear it called the heavy vehicle tax or whatever, but the whole HVUT you don't hear that much. But it is an annual federal tax that's required, and what the government uses it for is funding highway construction and maintenance projects. So there is there's this tool that the government has that they put this money into, and the federal government doesn't really do much with that money for the most part. What they do is they send it to the states. So a state will say, you know, here in Arkansas, they'll say, hey, we need to redo I-40, I-30 interchange over here in Little Rock, and we want to get some federal assistance on paying that, and they'll put an application in to the federal government to get a distribution of funds. And so when you pay that tax, that's what the tax is going to. You aren't the only one who's paying it, and this isn't the only time you're paying into that fund. You also pay for it every time you buy gas, and I pay for it. I don't drive a big rig, but I pay for it every time I buy gas. I just got a Honda, but I still pay for it in my gas taxes. So part of that money, every time you fill up with gas, is going into the highway construction and maintenance projects. Part of the reason that truck drivers have a tax to pay is because it's a heavy vehicle, right? And so, you know, anything that's heavier going down the road is gonna take up more of a load. It's gonna burn out more of the asphalt. You know, you'll see the potholes that develop if the you know, if the National Guards come through with all of their big Humvees and trucks and stuff. Recently, you know, the roads might get a little bit more torn up from that. You see it in Ukraine, right, where they're driving all kinds of tanks and stuff on the road. That's not what the roads were made for, and so they're going to have some construction problems when they get done with all the stuff over there. But so that's what your tax money is going to pay for. It's going to pay for the construction and the maintenance projects out there for the road, and the amount you owe for the tax goes up as the vehicle that you are driving, as the weight of that vehicle goes up as well. So 55,000 pounds was the minimum. That's as low as you can go for the dollar figure, which is $100. And then anything 75,000 and above is going to be $550. And then the last bullet point down there gets us into kind of the time frame that you're talking about. So if you start your career, or you put a new truck on the road, or it might be a new to you truck, might not be a new truck, but a new to you truck, if you put that on the road in the middle of the year, and I'm using air quotes for middle of the year because our tax year for 2290 actually starts in the middle of the year. It starts July 1st and runs through June 30th. But if you put a truck on the road in February, like my example was earlier, then you're not going to have to pay the full $550 for that year, because you're only going to have it on the road in February, March, April, May, and June. So you're only going to be putting it out there for 5 months. So that gets prorated down. Now, this time of the year, when you're renewing your 2290, it is going to push it up to the full year. And so whether it's $100 at a 55,000 pound load, or it's 550, 75,000 plus, you're going to pay that full freight for the renewal each year as you go forward after that first year when you get it onto the road. Now, there are some circumstances where you don't pay the tax. You can have a taxable vehicle, you can have a tax suspended vehicle, and those are kind of two different categories. Most of the time, you are paying the tax because, hey, they're the IRS, right? They want to collect their money. But most of the time you're paying the tax. There are some times when you are driving what's considered to be a tax suspended vehicle and aren't required to pay. So one of those instances is if you're driving less than 5,000 miles during the tax year. And so, that could be it's still a pretty reasonably sized truck, right? But if you're just going from a warehouse to a shop and it's, 2 minutes down the road that you're doing that, you're not going to wind up having to pay the tax because you're traveling less than 5,000 miles during that tax year. Like I think about like a church that does a ongoing flea market kind of experience, right? And they got a little warehouse that somebody's paid for them, but they need to get the stuff from the unloading site at the warehouse back over to the flea market that they're putting their stuff at. So that's a time when they might not be having more than 5,000 miles driven during the course of that year, and so they wouldn't have a taxable vehicle. Other vehicles that would be used by the federal government, by state or local government, nonprofit volunteer fire departments, Red Cross, DC, mass transportation, so the buses and stuff like that, those aren't going to be required either. And then vehicles used exclusively for agricultural and that travel less than 7,500 miles per year are also included in that tax suspended category. Now, just because a tax is suspended doesn't mean you don't need to file your 2290 and get your Schedule 1. You still need to file your 2290 and get your Schedule 1, even though you don't have to pay the tax. So don't get caught in that situation where you totally 100% are qualified for a tax suspended vehicle, but you don't go through the process to get your Schedule 1 because you'll get caught. Sure as shooting, you'll get caught, and that'll be something that causes you some stress and some pain and some penalties and some dollars and all that kind of stuff going on down the line there. So the deadlines still apply, even if you're not owing any tax. You still have the same deadlines, and we'll talk about the deadline here in just a minute. But you've got to get that information done. Even if you're reporting tax suspended, you still got to provide your VIN. You got to provide the first month it's used. You got to have the EIN. Whole shebang that we've talked about before is still applicable, even if you are filing a tax suspended vehicle. So just keep that in mind if that is something that that does apply to you. Another variance under the law is for what are called logging vehicles. And I like to say that if you drive a logging vehicle, you probably know that you drive a logging vehicle. There's a lumber mill right down I-40 here, west of Conway, and I drive past it all the time. It's a nice smell. You can smell them as they're working on the wood and stuff. But they've got logging trucks. They're going all the time. You can see them with the big trees, stuck on the back. You can see them when they're hauling the boards back out after they've got the finished products out there. So logs, wood chips, pulpwood, all that kind of harvested wood products. Those are going to be your logging vehicles. And if you're going to claim the logging vehicle rate, which is a lower rate, then there's a checkbox on the form that you want to make sure that you check. And same other rules apply. It's just one more checkbox that you check for your logging vehicles. If at some point during the course of the year, you decide to take that logging vehicle off the road, or you don't really take it off the road, you just change it, right? So it's because your truck can drive any kind of trailer, and so you detach the logging and you become a standard shipper, right? You're going out and you're doing over the road loads or whatever it is that you're in a standard box, but you're no longer eligible for that reduced rate, and so you'll owe a bit of an additional tax. It'll be prorated. So if you filed your vehicle as a logging vehicle in July, and then in the next March you decide to switch it over and you're doing it different, you're going to owe a smaller bit of that tax from March, April, May, and June to get you back up to what the standard vehicle payment would have been. So agricultural vehicles are another area where you can be exempt. We called that out as a specific one under the exemption, but we want to go into a little bit more detail here because you could be hauling farm products, but not really be an agricultural vehicle. There's a lot of, especially here through Arkansas, we've got a lot of Tyson farms that are through here, and so they're taking the chickens and turkeys. They're going all over the place, and those trucks are driving more than 7,500 miles a year, and so they don't qualify for this exemption. But my grandpa was a tobacco farmer, and so he had one truck, and he didn't drive it very much. So he just drove it during harvest, but he would have his boxes lined up, and would put all the tobacco up there to dry out, and then not me because I don't know how to drive one, but he would hook it up to the rig, and he would drive it over to the warehouse, to the auction house, so that they could take care of it. But that was 5 miles away from his farm, so he was pretty ideally located, and he only drove it 20 trips. So he's doing 200 miles a year going back and forth between the farm and the auction house. So he was under the 200. He was under the 7,500 miles per year. He was doing it for only farming purposes, and so he got to be exempt from the heavy vehicle utility tax because it was used exclusively for farming purposes. It was registered appropriately, and it was driven less than 7,500 miles. So again, probably doesn't apply to you, right? There's only so many logging vehicles, there's only so many agricultural vehicles. But if it does apply to you, or if it applies to one of your clients, it's good to know that they can take advantage of those little bitty differences that are out there. So specifically for Ez2290, I've mentioned our site a couple of times, and we've been in this business. So we actually started this business in 2009. We started doing it as soon as the IRS started announcing that e-file was going to be a requirement for doing the 2290s. So we're one of the oldest players in doing this process through the electronic filing. You can always get your forms pretty quickly. Again, if you file it now for next year, because we're open for pre-file, but if you file it now for next year, you're not going to get it until July. But on a standard basis, you're just going to get it in a few minutes after you click your filing, and it gets accepted by the IRS. If you have a correction, there's a problem with your VIN, because sometimes that'll happen. You'll have a problem where again, you just type the VIN in wrong. They'll reject it, and they'll say, hey, no, this number doesn't match up. And you'll look at it and you'll say, oh yeah, I put in a 1, it's supposed to be a 2, whatever it is. That gets messed up pretty frequently. And so we don't charge anything for you to fix that. And then we will make sure that you're not getting penalized, because we're going to make sure you're getting the right tax filing based on the information that you enter into Ez2290 with us. Our security is top notch. So we not only have this 2290 business, and we lock it down with all of our security stuff, but we have a 1099 business and a W-2 business, so where we collect a lot of personal information from people, not collect it from people, but collect it from businesses who need to file those forms with the IRS or the Social Security Administration, and get them out to people, employees and contractors in January. So we have to kind of keep up with all of the security, make sure that it is equivalent of what the banks are doing, at least, because we work with a lot of the biggest accounting firms in the country, and if we don't, would be out of business. So we've got to make sure that our security is top notch as well. We talked about the calculations, and one thing to note at the bottom here. So if you are working as a fleet manager, you're working and filing multiple vehicles at once, we do have a bulk upload that may be advantageous for you. If all of your clients are individual owner operators, it might not be as much. But if you've got a fleet, or you've got a client that has a fleet, and you want to automatically populate a bunch of stuff at one time, and you can bulk upload it, we've got a process for doing that, and you can reach out to our support team to find out more about doing that process. I got one more poll for you here at the end, so let me just pull that one up. And this question is just going to ask, how are you currently doing your 2290 filing? So there is a local, quote unquote, IRS office that you can go to. And I say local because it might be local to you, but it's not local to me. I can't go to one where I am and get there real conveniently. But some people do have them that are closer around. You could be doing it with us through Ez2290. You could be doing it through another e-file provider. And so one of the advantages of doing it with us year over year is that we just keep your information in there. And then as you move from the 2020, what year am I in now? I'm in 2022-23, and I'm going to be moving into 2023-24 as we get into July here. Once you get that, once you've got that information established, you don't have to enter your VIN again the next time. You have to enter your EIN again the next time. It's going to be in there for you. Just push it over and say, yep, that's the right information. Or you can edit it. If something changed during the course of the year, you might have moved, right? And so you can edit that information. All right, so let me show you what you guys are doing. So thank you. A lot of you are working with us already for Ez2290, and appreciate that. Thanks for coming back year after year and continuing to work with us. And if you're not working with us, I encourage you to do so. So we do, like I said, in conclusion, we've got lots of ways that we can help you get that HVUT requirement. It is a requirement. Failing to comply is only costly, right? You're going to get penalties, you're going to get fines, and it's just time consuming. You're going to get a headache. Not good. So please do your filing. You can pre-file right now, and by pre-file, what I mean is if you're already got all your information for the July renewal period that's coming up, you can go ahead and schedule it now. You can put it out there in Ez2290 right now. When the IRS opens on July 1st, July 1st is a Saturday, so they might not open until July 3rd, but whenever they open in July, we'll have your form in queue there waiting for them to process it. They'll process it, they'll send you to Schedule 1, it'll be in your account, it'll be good to go. You do have until the end of August, so you know, the way the schedule always works is the first month that you're going to put the vehicle on the road is you get that month plus the end of the next month to do your filing. And so when you're going through a renewal process, the same principle applies. July is the renewal month. August 31st is the deadline of that month. So if you pre-file, you're not in any danger of missing that deadline, not in any danger of having any late filing penalties, and you don't have to wait in line to get it done like if you go to the IRS. All right, so question and answer time. You know, thank you guys for participating here, but I don't see any questions yet. But if you do have any, please pop those in to the Q&A panel. I mentioned that earlier, but if you got any questions, please pop those in there. Otherwise, I just want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes with me here today and talking about the 2290s, and hopefully you learned something. We will send out a recording of this session. If you again want to share it with anybody or have any questions, you can follow up to the email that's on the recording that we'll send it out to. So thank you all for attending our session today.